Hi everybody, I'm Erica. I am the lead trainer at SSD Bart Group. And today, are you okay? Okay. Today we're going to be talking about common accessibility mistakes and how to avoid them. Because we only have 30 minutes today, I don't know how deep I'll get into how to avoid them, but I'll try my best. So the reason that I got into accessibility was I started working for a nonprofit organization where I did training and evaluations for people with disabilities, and I would try to find the best solutions for them, so in terms of assistive technology. And I was finding that when people were navigating the web, there were a lot of issues, and it wasn't because they didn't know how to use their assistive technology, it was because of mistakes that were made through the development, through the planning process, and that's when I came into web accessibility. So we're going to look at mistakes made from the very beginning with the planning process, the planning mistakes. We're going to look at design mistakes, and then we're going to look at some coding and UX mistakes. And if you're not a developer, it's totally fine. There's a little bit of code in here, but it's not. It's at a higher level, so you should be pretty good. So starting with planning mistakes, this is just an anecdote here. So an organization picks a third-party widget to use on their site. So it could be a slider, it could be a date picker or a media player, and the third-party widget is not accessible, but they want to deploy this on their site. Well, they need to first make that accessible, and if they can't make it accessible, they need to then find another third-party widget for their site. And if they don't do that, they could be at risk of complaints, they could be at risk of a lawsuit. So the goal here is to decide what third-party widgets you're going to use, deploy them, and make sure that they're accessible to begin with. So getting into design mistakes, we see this a lot when we're looking at color, when we're looking at images, and something that's being used a lot now are icon fonts. So we'll look at those here. So this is an example here of design mistakes using background images. So background images, people like to use them, but one thing is that you cannot apply alternative text to them. So what happens is, in my first example, colors are enabled. If we look at this example, this is from like an airline, and you have the galley and the bathroom. Those images are background images. When you remove images from the page, those background images are gone. And so somebody that is using a screen reader, somebody that is viewing this page without images, they may not know what that means. Now it's just two gray boxes. And then when you turn on high contrast mode, those images completely disappear. So for any users that are using high contrast mode, they will have no idea that those images even exist. So you need to provide some sort of text equivalent that's applied to those background images that allows the user to know that the purpose of those images, so that it's the galley or it's the restroom. Another common mistake that we see, insufficient color contrast. So a lot of times organizations will say, these are the colors that we want to use. This is from our logo, and we want to use those colors all across our site. But the problem with that is that many times they provide insufficient contrast. So in terms of standards, there are rules that you have to follow for color contrast. So you need to have a 4.5:1 color contrast ratio for any small text. In this example here, I'm showing a color contrast analyzer that provides a way where you can actually test the color contrast of your site. So you could pull the foreground color, you can pull the background color, and that actually gives you the ratio. So you don't have to calculate it yourself. There are tools that do it for you. Another mistake, using color as the sole means of identifying selection. So somebody that's navigating using a screen reader on the web needs to know certain elements. So they need to know that an item is selected. They need to know that's the state of the element. They need to know the role of the element, meaning is it a link, is it a button? So in this example here, they're using color to identify the selection state. So when you do that, somebody that can't see color, somebody that is using a screen reader will have no idea that this item is actually selected. Another very, very common mistake is displaying images without any alternative text. And despite being one of the #1 accessibility topics that people discuss and know about, it's one of the biggest issues facing accessibility on the web. So in this example, we have a picture of a dog, and it's a standard inline image, and there's no alternative text. So a screen reader user will come to this page, and they may hear the path. So they'll hear dog 1, 2, 3, 4 _ dog dot png. So that's a lot of information, but basically meaningless information. That doesn't tell the user the purpose of this image. And then another one in terms of images, if you display an image with meaningless alternative text, that's the same as displaying the image without any alternative text. A common example here is a search field with a search button. So in this example, there's a search button. The alternative text is magnifying glass. Well, somebody comes to this and they hear image button magnifying glass. What does that mean? They need to know that this is a search button. So a better alternative text would be search, so that when the user navigates to that button, they know exactly what the purpose of that image is. Okay. And then next for images, using images of text. So the problem with images of text is that somebody that needs to magnify the screen, if you're using images of text, that text becomes pixelated because it's an image. Another problem with that is that, a problem with that is that when you magnify, is this sound kind of funny? I'm sorry, it's distracting me as I'm speaking. So with images of text, a user who needs to use a certain presentation of the text, they need to have a certain color, they need to have a certain font style. If you're using images of text, screen magnifier users will not have the ability to change the font size or the font color. Okay, so next getting into coding mistakes. Very common issue is unusable forms. So we're going to talk about a few different issues here when we talk about forms. The first one, lack of field set and legend elements. So the way that we use field set and legend would be to group items together. Okay, would be to group items together. So if you have different forms, let's say you're filling out a form and you're purchasing something online. You may have shipping information and billing information. And it asks for name for shipping and name for billing. Well, the same label applies to those form fields, so you need to be able to distinguish between shipping and billing. So that's when we would use field set and legend. So when you're not using field set and legend, the user does not have the ability to group that information together, and therefore they may get confused. Is this for shipping? Is it for billing? And they may fill out the wrong information. Another one is mishandling form errors. So we've seen a lot of issues in terms of form errors. One is placing that error at the bottom of a form. So the user fills out an entire form, they navigate through everything, and then they submit it. And then let's say they're brought back to the top of the form. They may not know that any fields are in error because that error is placed at the very bottom of the form. Another issue with error messages is that they're displayed just using the color red, for instance. So when you're using color as the sole means of providing information, somebody who's using a screen reader, somebody who's colorblind will have no idea the purpose of that, that field in red or an error message in red. Placeholders. So we hear placeholders a lot, especially developers say, oh, we want to use placeholders because of the real estate on a mobile device. So placeholders, there's a lot of issues with placeholders. One is that when you place focus into a field, that placeholder is actually removed from the field. And so if somebody doesn't remember what that field, the purpose of that field is for, they would have to navigate out of the field, back in, remove the text. It's a whole problem. There's a lot of keyboard shortcuts you have to use when navigating within a field. So placeholders should not be used for labels for that reason. Okay. Another one, improper association of label and input. So visually, if you're looking at this particular form that I have on screen, there's a first name visually and then a text field next to it. So visually, if we're looking at this, it appears that first name applies to this form field. However, in the code, they're not associated. So the way that we do that is with the for attribute and the ID. So if there's any developers in the room, you would say label for, and then you would give it, you would match that to the ID of the input field. So when the user navigates into that field, they would hear first name. When they navigate to the next field, they'd hear last name. So that's very important when navigating through a form field. Okay, next, improper data table structure. Data tables make it really easy for somebody using a screen reader to navigate through because people are able to use specific keyboard commands in order to hear information. So if you're visually looking at a table, you know that name of cereal is the column header, and you know that amount of element iron from least to greatest is the column header for that column. But somebody using a screen reader won't know this association between that column header and the data cell. So the next, failure to provide accessibility information such as name, state, role, and value. These are all very important things that you need to know when navigating through a site. So somebody using a screen reader needs to have access to information like the name, state, role, and value. So for instance, if you're navigating through a menu, you need to know that an item is a link or it's a button. You need to know that that item can be expanded. And you need to know the state of it. Is it expanded? Is it collapsed? So all of that information needs to be conveyed. Okay, another one, providing controls that use device-dependent event handlers. So in this example here, it's a link, and they're using a div to provide that link. So there are standard actionable elements, meaning anchors, buttons. These can all be navigated to with the keyboard. They can be activated with the keyboard. But things like divs, things like images, these cannot be navigated to naturally with the keyboard. So there are things that you have to do in order to apply that keyboard access to that particular element. So in this case, if we just change this to a standard anchor, so an A tag, this link would be able to be navigated to. You can activate it with the keyboard. Dialogue has become a big issue for people with disabilities, so there's a lot of things that you need to do in order to make them accessible. So one, making sure that the dialogue receives focus. Number two, making sure that your focus remains in the dialogue. And then three, making sure that focus returns properly. So for the first one, ensuring dialogues receive focus. When a user activates a link and that displays a dialogue on the page, focus then needs to be brought to that dialogue on the page. If focus is not brought to the dialogue, the user may not know that the dialogue has even appeared on the page, and they may try to navigate through that dialogue not knowing that they're in the dialogue. The second one is ensure focus remains within the dialogue. So when you're navigating through a dialogue, meaning you're pressing the tab key to go through all of the actionable elements, your focus needs to stay on that dialogue as opposed to moving through all of the background. Like you may see a dialogue with grayed out information behind it. If the user is able to navigate through that grayed out information, then they may be trying to activate links or buttons that are not actually actionable. So they're actually they're hidden from a user using the mouse, but they're not hidden from somebody using just the keyboard alone. And then the last one, ensure focus returns properly. So if you have a link on a page, the user activates the link, a dialogue is displayed. When they close that dialogue, focus needs to return back to the link that activated it. The reason that we do this is that when a user who's just using the keyboard, somebody who's using a screen reader, if they're brought back to the top of the page as opposed to the link that activated it, they're going to have to navigate around the entire page just to get back to where they were before. So it's very important that you bring focus back to that link that activated the dialogue. Okay. So the next one, incorrect use of headings. So a lot of times people will use headings in terms of visual display. So they may, in this example, we have a page title, and then they're using a heading 4 first, then a heading 5, and then a heading 2. And the reason they do this is for the visual display of this text. But what we really want to do is use the proper order of those headings. Screen reader users have the ability to navigate through a page by heading. So if they press the letter H, they'll navigate to the first heading on the page, and it will tell them the heading level. So all of that information is very important. When they press the letter H and they go to heading 5, and then heading 3, and then heading 1, it could be very confusing. People may think that they've missed some information on the page. So it's really important that you stay in the proper order, and you want to make sure that you're using headings appropriately on your page. So now we're going to look at a few UX mistakes. So one is visible focus. So this is a big issue we see. Designers say, oh, I don't want to provide visual focus to my links because it changes the look of the page. Well, it's not, you don't want to remove focus. The reason is when a user is navigating with the tab key, they're pressing the tab and they're navigating to all of the links on the page, they need to be able to see where they are on the page. Somebody that's just using the keyboard alone needs to know where they are so that they're not activating links, they're not activating buttons that they don't want to go to. If you're on let's say you're on a banking page and you have two links and one says send money to Erica or send money to my bank account. If they select send money to Erica without knowing, they're sending all of their money to me and I'm happy, but they're not. So you want to provide visual focus to all active elements so that a user knows where they are on the page. The next one is keyboard trap. So a lot of times we see this being used in text editors. A text editor meaning like they can tab into a big text field, they can alter the text, they can make it bold, they can italicize the text. If they press the tab key, they're not moving out of that text field, they're actually indenting the text. So that would be an example of a keyboard trap. Another example would be something like a social security number. If they, let's say they fill out the first few numbers in their social security number, focus automatically is shifted to the next field, and then the user can't actually go back to the previous field. So this causes a lot of issues for people that are just using the keyboard to navigate. They're not actually able to go back if they make a mistake. They can't fix the issue. Okay, and then the last one here, providing multimedia without synchronized text alternative and audio description. So we see this a lot with videos, audio description. For those that don't know what audio description is, it's used for people who are blind that are viewing any video content, maybe a movie or a TV show, and it provides narration to the user. So if there's no dialogue at all that's going on screen, it tells the user what's happening. So I'm going to play this video, and this video does have captions, but I'm not going to put them on because they were used with YouTube's automated captioning, and they are completely incorrect and offensive, and nobody wants to see that. But if you do want to look this video up, you can just type in YouTube Frozen trailer with audio description, and you can turn the captions on if you do want to see them. But I'm going to go ahead and play this so you can see what audio description is. I think I need to use this microphone. Okay.
From the creators of Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph, Disney. A carrot-nosed, coal-eyed snowman shuffles up to a purple flower peeping out of deep snow.
Ooh, hello.
He takes a deep sniff. His nose lands on a frozen pond. A reindeer looks up and pants like a dog. Seeing the reindeer slip on the ice, the snowman smiles and moves towards him, though actually he's running on the spot. The reindeer falls on his chin. The snowman uses his arm as a crutch. The reindeer paddles his front legs. Head over heels, the snowman crawls along the ice. The reindeer does the breaststroke. The snowman rolls his body, but flips onto his back. The reindeer's tongue sticks to the ice. The snowman held his head. Twig arm and reindeer lips tug at the carrot. The carrot flies off and lands in soft snow. The reindeer goes after it with snowman and his body parts hanging on his tail. The snowman puts himself back together again and glumly contemplates his noseless state. The reindeer jams the carrot back in place and pants like a proud puppy. The snowman pats him with his stick-thin arm, then goes to sneeze. He grabs his nose with both hands. His head shoots off. Frozen, coming this winter in 3D.
Yeah, so that is audio description. So that's a good video to demonstrate audio description because there's no dialogue at all. So you can imagine somebody that's viewing this video who's blind, they have no idea what's going on if there's no audio description because all they're hearing is sounds, screaming. They have no idea what that means. So with that being said, are there any questions, comments? Yes?
What corporations do you work with? Do you work with city schools?
Yeah, we work with a variety of organizations, financial institutions, nonprofits, education, basically everybody.
And once they get it, do they get it or do you have to keep coming back?
Yeah, That's a really good question. So we typically, I do training, so I'll go and train the developers and the designers. Typically, they do need additional training. So we have what's called SSB University, where they can access online courses. And then we also have consultants that work with their developers and designers. So they'll audit a site, they'll test the site for accessibility, and then they'll work with their developers on making it accessible. Yes?
I wonder if you could say something just quickly about best practices for accessible maps.
Accessible maps. So are you talking about like SVG images or interactive maps?
Things like Mapbox or Google Maps that are embedded to find locations or to find services. This is a huge usability issue for people with screen readers. What do you do?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one, but so with maps, you want to, one, make sure that they're keyboard accessible. You need to make sure that if there's any dynamic content, that has to be announced to the user, so you can use things like ARIA to announce that. It's always good to provide an alternative as well. So an example that I always give is the Tokyo subway map. It's really intense. There's a lot of routes. So what they've done is they have the map. It's just a static image. They provide a description, and then there's also a table displaying the routes for those maps. Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I really like WebAIM. It's a really nice resource. They provide a lot of information. We have somebody at our company that provides accessible widgets through ARIA, and he works for the WAI, and he provides the specification for ARIA. That's whatsock.com. So if you're interested in accessible widgets, that's a really nice resource. Whatsock.com. Here, I'll pull it up here. W-A-T. Here we go. W-H. That's how you spell what. What? W-H-A-T-S-O-C-K.com. Yeah, and he has some really nice, there's a technical style guide. He provides widgets like pop-ups and all of the ARIA that's associated with those widgets. Any other thoughts? Okay, thank you very much.